Anna Rose Bain, welcome to the Undraped Artist Podcast.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So we go way back. I think I met you at the Porch Society of America like 10 years ago or something.
Oh, it's been at least 10 years.
You think? Yeah.
Probably 12.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably. So how long have you been doing the Porch Society thing or attending it?
My first one was in 2009. So I've attended 12 of the last 13 or 14.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
the only time I missed was when I was about to pop with my daughter. I was pregnant with my daughter.
Oh, really? That's the only one you've
Yeah.
missed? Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we must have met at one of the earlier ones. I think I've been doing it about 10 years now. So it must have been
Okay.
pretty early on. So,
Yeah, you were always a star. So,
well, I doubt
it's been
that.
an honor to get to know you over the years.
Same to you. The first question I want to ask you is, how did you get started as a full-time painter?
As a full-time painter,
Well, I realize you're splitting your time between mom and painter.
yeah, I was lucky enough to have 5 or 6 really good years after graduating college to focus on just painting. And my husband and I, we got married in 2008. I graduated from Hillsdale College in 2007. So it was pretty much right after college that I started working as a painter. And I had about a year in between there where I was working for a photography studio, which was a
Mm-hmm.
great job. I loved it. But I think that year I only did maybe 3 or 4 paintings altogether.
Oh,
So
ouch.
it was after we got married, we moved to Texas for his job as an engineer. He was like, look, if this is what you want, you should just set up your easel and paint all day, every day. And that's what I did. And it was kind of scary, It was like I had this big empty studio space and a tiny little French easel in the corner. And I really didn't know who I was as an artist yet or what I wanted to say, but I really put myself out there. I was doing art festivals, which, when I look back, I'm like, that was probably not the best idea for the kind of art I wanted to do, but it was something. And I would occasionally get a commission out of that, or if I was lucky, I broke even.
Yeah.
And eventually I made my way into a gallery in Texas, and they did pretty well selling my work. And I was doing portrait commissions, anything I could basically find to just be painting all the time. And some of those commissions were really tough. I remember shedding more than a few tears over some of those because they seemed like problems I just couldn't solve at the
Hmm.
time, given my skill level. And yet the clients were always happy with them. I never had someone say, hey, you got to do this over again. This isn't good enough. Everybody was happy, and that really just gave me the affirmation I needed to keep going as a painter. And so, yeah, that was really how I got started. And I also found a life portrait and figure group in Texas where I was living at the time with Michael Metler, who's another Portrait Society regular, and just started painting portraits from life every single week. And he would bring in artists to teach workshops there. And I got to attend those for free because I would help line up the models and just kind of bring them coffee, buy them lunch, all this stuff. I was kind of the runner for that. But
Mm-hmm.
I didn't care. I was just soaking up everything I possibly could to hone my craft. And that's really what it takes. You can call yourself a professional full-time artist, but still be learning constantly. And that's the way I like to look at it. It's half execution and half just education all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting that you would put it that way because it's almost, most careers you graduate from college and you are that thing. In fact, it was interesting because someone
Hmm.
was saying that they're a poet the other day. I heard a presentation by somebody who was a quote unquote poet. I've never seen this or read this person's poetry, so I don't know. But they defined themselves as a poet because they had graduated from a college and had studied poetry. And I remember
Hmm.
hearing that and thinking, so that's how you define being a poet because you had finished a 4-year degree. And I'm not saying that's wrong. It just was so foreign to me because I've been working as an artist for 20 years and I still don't know if I'm an artist.
Oh, you certainly are.
Well, thank you. But you know what I mean? It's like we're always students, right? And it's like you
Yes,
start to sell
yes.
paintings, but it feels like there's no just cutoff where it's like, oh, today I'm the artist, right?
Right. I think you have days where you feel more confident than other days,
Yeah.
for sure. We all have really good days and really bad days, but that doesn't define whether or not we're actually artists. We're always artists. And I think part of being an artist is just being in the struggle.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what makes it. Because if you're not overcoming those obstacles and solving those problems, then what's the point?
That's valid.
It's
Yeah, that's true. So one thing you said that I think would be worth talking a little about for the viewers, you said you thought it might have been not the best idea to do the art fairs. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. Why do you feel that way?
um, I think because I was trying to paint things that were more gallery type pieces or paintings that had a higher price point than what people
Mm.
typically would want to pay when they're going into an art fair or festival. Typically, these kinds of places have a lot of crafts, a lot of, woodworking, ceramics, jewelry, handcrafted items, and maybe photography would be kind of some of the higher end stuff that you'll see, but not very often figurative realism.
Right.
And so it ended up being a good connection for me to get portrait commissions, but very few of these events, I hardly sold anything. Once in a while I'd sell one painting and that was enough to pay for my entry fee and all of that, time that weekend, but it could be really discouraging. I'm not saying it doesn't work, because it can work for some people. And I met artists who had been doing it for many, many years and were really successful at it, but I just discovered it wasn't for me. And the other thing is, it's really hard on your paintings to be outdoors for 3 days in a tent. If it rains and you're working with linen that's prepared with rabbit skin glue, your linen's going to
Ooh,
warp.
yeah.
Your paintings might warp while they're out there. So it's not very conservation friendly for fine art.
Oh, that's something I never even thought about. Do you work with rabbit skin glue?
Yeah, I do. Not always, but when I'm doing a really large painting that I want on a stretched stretcher bars, say like a 30 by 48 or something, then I like to use rabbit skin glue because that's the tightest I can get it. If
Yeah.
I'm stretching a painting with pre-primed linen, I can never quite get it as tight as I would like. And I have the really expensive, tools for it, but there's nothing quite like that drum-like bounce of rabbit skin
Oh
glue.
no, it's incredible. But can I tell you something? I guess I'm telling the whole world this. Um, so I own, I don't know, maybe 50 paintings from other artists, and two of them have a rabbit skin glue foundation, and both of them happen to come from back east. So I live in Utah. I mean, you know that, but others
Yeah,
might.
yeah.
Um, and they're the only two paintings that have failed.
Oh no.
Yeah, yeah. And
Did the artists prepare them themselves?
yes, but the reason they failed is because they couldn't take the humidity change. The rabbit skin glue didn't like it. So it's just something that I've thought a lot about. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know how this rabbit skin glue is, if it's the way to go. But anyway, I'm not critiquing your
Yeah,
work,
there's
but I
a
was like,
oh
out of
no,
50 paintings, two of them were rabbit skin glue. They both
oh,
failed.
that's sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate about it out there, and I've tried everything. And so, I'm starting to work more with rigid surfaces
Yeah.
ultimately, just because they are more conservation friendly. But part of me still loves working on that stretch canvas
Oh, I
because
know.
you
Yeah.
just can't quite get the same effect. You can't get the same brushwork. There's something completely different about it. So,
Yeah.
and I'll use, some of the acrylic polymers and that kind of stuff instead of rabbit skin glue as well. So I'm trying to like wean myself off of it, but at the end of the day, it's still my favorite.
I know. Well, and it is anecdotal. I mean, you can't. I have sort of concluded that I'm not going to use rabbit skin glue for that reason, but I realize it's hardly scientific. Just one person's experience, right? Um,
Sure. And no matter what you do, I mean, you have to take good care of your artwork.
yeah,
I think artists especially are really notorious for not taking care of our work in our
right.
studio, or like maybe we'll transport a painting to the gallery and we just throw it in our car. So my husband's called me out on that a few times before. He's like, "You've got to treat this like it's already been sold to somebody."
Yeah. And I will say they were both prepared by the same artist. So there might be something to that as well. They're both from the same artist. But
Yeah, yeah.
anyway,
There's
it's
definitely a learning curve.
I know. But it's yeah, that's the thing about painting is it's hard to know. You know, there's so many options now with all these different mediums and all these different surfaces and you know, 'cause they come in and out of fashion and it's like what, you know, it's hard to know what's going to last.
Yeah. I did make a YouTube series on oil painting surfaces,
Oh, you
and it
did?
was, yeah, three different videos. One of them is how to take really cheap canvases and sort of doctor them to be a much better working surface.
Oh,
And
interesting.
then another one is just kind of like all the different types that I've used over the years and what I like about them or don't like about them. And then the third one is actually me preparing a linen canvas from start to finish. So yeah,
So
I've
what's the
explored this
address to
topic a
those?
lot.
What's the address to those?
Well, you can just look me up on YouTube.
Okay.
I have my own channel. It's Anna Rose Bain, and I'm actually not sure what the address is for them, but
No, I'm
they're
sure people can find them.
preparing, um, what is it called? Oil painting surfaces. I think you can Google it and find
Okay.
them that way. So
So
yeah,
they can learn the right way to prepare a rabbit skin glued surface, canvas
the
surface.
right way to do rabbit
Yeah.
skin glue. Yeah, and I've gotten a few comments on that post where people are like, "Well, you're doing this wrong" or whatever, but it's pretty subjective. It's one of
That's the
those things.
problem, I know. And no one really, I mean, yeah, that's the problem. Well, anyway, the good news is not to get, I mean, I know we're way off on a tangent here, but both paintings were repaired by conservators. They're fine. But
Oh, good.
yeah. But anyway, so the other question that I thought about it, you know, because what I had said earlier about you're also a mom, I want to talk a little about that. How in the world do you balance that, being a mom and a painter?
You know, I thought balance was everything for many, many years. I thought that was so crucial, and I'm realizing that it's kind of overrated.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Okay.
and I say that tongue in cheek, but it's like if you really, really want to be excellent at what you do, you can't exactly have perfect balance in your life. If you look at the greats throughout history, Beethoven, Mozart, some of the greatest painters like Da Vinci and Michelangelo, they had no balance in their lives whatsoever. And I'm not saying that's good, but they had this kind of pathological obsession with being the best at what they did. And part of me is really, really drawn to that. There's this side of me that's like, I have to just go for it. And, you know, that unfortunately at the expense of other things. But my children really keep me grounded. They keep me with both feet on the ground, and they help me remember what's important. And so I'm grateful for that because they have taught me so much about myself and what it means to be human, what it means to be fully human and have that full experience as a woman, especially. But also, they help me just not be this obsessive, compulsive person all the time, which I think I would be if I didn't have them. So,
Yeah.
but it's always a struggle. Every day is different. I don't really have a set schedule. My kids are gradually getting back into school, so that's helpful. But I had both of them home with me all summer this year, and so I kind of had to change my focus a little bit and be okay with the fact that I was not going to have those long hours in the studio, especially in the summer. And that was hard. That was hard for me, but I tried to spend as much time with my kids as I could because they're only little for a very, very short period of
Hmm.
time. And just be making lots of paintings in my head and planning those out, because someday those will end up on canvas. But in the meantime, I'm just stockpiling them in my mind. And that's okay too. You know, you don't stop being an artist when you step away from the easel. You're always looking for those opportunities and for those compositions and for those moments of inspiration. And so I don't regret that time. So all that to say, yeah, I'm still trying to figure out the whole balance thing. It's definitely tough, especially when my kids are younger. You know, they're 4 and 8 now, so still pretty young.
So how does your husband feel about you accepting the fact that balance is overrated for an artist?
It's been a source of conflict for us, but it's funny, when we first met and realized, you know, he's an engineer, I'm an artist, we're absolutely as opposite as they come. And yet he was like, I really want to support you in this. I can see that you're really passionate about this. You really love what you do. And I think he was, he really admired that about me and was willing to take on a career that would pay the bills so that I could pursue my passion. And he's been consistently good about that throughout the years. So I really appreciate that about him. And, you know, for sure we have our conflicts because we are so different, but you know, he's good for me. He's the kind that will sit back and relax and, you know, watch the sunset. And I'm like, I gotta get my easel. I gotta paint that sunset.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife and I were coming home from church yesterday, and we walked by a coffee shop, and all these people were lounging around. It was probably noon Sunday, and there had to have been, I don't know, 20, 30 people just sitting around on the grass, on the tables. And I said to my wife, what is that? I can't even relate to that. I can't, like, there's so much to do. How can you just sit on the grass? Like, I don't even understand that mentality. Like, I can't remember the last time I just sat on the grass for a long period of time. Obviously for short, you know, moments here and there, but for a long period of time and just chilled.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. People here in Colorado do that a lot too. They'll just take a weekend and go tubing down the river or sit on the grass by the river and watch their dog play in the water. And I'm like, what's that like?
There's two, you know, and I, you know, just for those listening, it's not that I can't make the time, and I'm sure you probably could too. It's that we choose not to make the time.
Right.
It's like an illness. Right. Yeah.
It is. We're a little bit crazy, and it's okay.
Yeah. So, okay. So during the summer, did you get any painting time in at all?
I did. Yeah, a little bit. My son is starting to drop his naps, but once in a while, if he took a nap, I would get to paint during that. Sometimes when my husband took the kids, I would paint. So I was just fitting it in wherever I could. I got a couple paintings in this summer, so I'm happy about that. And then I did travel quite a bit. And I do make a point to travel actually by myself, because sometimes I have to physically leave the house in order to actually be able to refocus on painting. So I went to Malibu for a few days, and that was wonderful. Did some plein air painting.
By yourself?
Painted with my friend Jeremy Liv King out there, which was lovely.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I love doing these trips by myself. And in fact, over the years, that's how I recharge, is I will take a trip, especially to a national park or something like that. I've gone to, I've gone to Joshua Tree, I've gone to Death Valley, Big Bend National Park, Arches and Canyonlands.
All by yourself?
Phenomenal. I would love to. Oh yeah. Yeah.
What?
I mean, I bring the bear spray, but
I mean, no, not that I don't think you can handle being alone. It's just, I don't know. I'm a people person. I can't imagine doing that.
I am a trained people person, but deep down, I'm actually very introverted. So I have to have that time alone to recharge, to connect with God, to connect with nature, to kind of just recenter myself. And you know, there's a reason why in the Bible Jesus goes off to the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights. Like, he had such a public ministry, but also needed that time to just be alone. And so I really relate to that. And I also relate to the symbolism of the desert and how um, we have these dry periods in our lives that we have to struggle through in order to get to the other side. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've just found a lot of meaning in that and encouragement.
Yeah,
So I always come back with my tank full again.
that's great. Well, you heard it here first, folks. Jesus was an introvert, according to Aunt Rose Bain.
I think so.
He needed 40 years away from anybody so he could go back and heal people.
40
Or
days.
40 days, 40 days. And of course, not 40 years, of course. Oh, man, that's funny. Well, I think you make a valid point, though. I mean, there is something really spiritual, for lack of a better word, for just being out in the wilderness away from anything. So,
Yeah, and there's something spiritual about painting. You know,
yeah,
we're creating, we're mimicking that original act, and I think that's really beautiful and a very high calling that sometimes we don't even realize just how great that is to be able to do that. Um, so I try not to take that for granted.
yeah. So, do you get, I mean, with your time, I know you're an excellent figurative painter, you're a landscape painter, you're a still life painter, you've done it all. How do you decide on a daily basis where to put your time? Because I struggle with that personally. I tend to gravitate toward the studio, but I'm always like, I want to go out and paint a landscape painting, and then I end up back in the studio again. But you seem to be
Yeah.
really good about diversifying your activities as a painter.
Well, part of it is seasonal. So, like in the early summer, June and July, that's when I'm painting flowers. I have all these flowers on my property
Mm-hmm.
that just kind of all bloom at the same time. And I love floral paintings. I have a lot of collectors that love them, so that's always good. Peonies are my favorite, and they have such a short growing season that I try to take advantage of that. And then in the wintertime, I'll be in my studio doing figurative paintings based on maybe some photo shoots I did during the summer and fall. And that's also when I'm doing a lot of portrait commissions. So I try to kind of space things out by the season and take advantage of every season for what it has to offer. In the fall, I try to keep that open for a lot of hiking in the mountains. The Rocky Mountains in late September, early October are just stunning with the aspen trees, and the weather's beautiful. The other part of it is just whatever happens to be really at the forefront of my mind at the time. Maybe it's my kid having a milestone that I want to capture, or maybe it's a friend of mine and their baby that I want to paint. Or so I try to keep some of that open as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I do a couple of pro bono paintings every year, so I try to fit those in as well.
You
It's just,
do. Well, I want to hear more about that.
yeah, I do.
So and you make an effort to do a couple of year. It's not like people just come to you, but you make a conscious effort to do a couple of a year.
Well, people do come to me and I have to pick and choose.
Okay.
So I might have several different options out there and I just pick whatever moves me the most, I guess. For example, last year, my high school piano teacher had passed away, and his wife asked me to do a painting of him for his memorial service. And I was like, absolutely. Yes, I want to honor him in that way. Um, there's another one that I'm working on right now for a couple. She has been struggling with cancer, and so I'm doing that kind of in honor of them. And then others I'll do for specific organizations, maybe the Scottsdale Artist School or some of the other organizations out there. So
Oh, it's
it really
really
just
cool.
depends on, yeah, I like doing that. I like being able to give a little bit. So.
Wow, now you've made me feel really guilty because
Well,
I
and there's always
rarely
the
do
Portrait
that.
Society too, you know, that
Yeah.
everything that we do for them is for a great cause. So,
Yeah.
but you do that, you paint the face off and
Oh, well,
they auction it off.
yeah, I give my time, but I'm really bad about giving paintings. And I think the justification, which is a poor justification, I'm sure, is that I just feel like I don't get enough time to paint. So,
Yeah,
it's
I feel
hard
that
for me
way
to
too,
give
for
away
sure.
my painting time when it's so precious already.
Yes, I
So,
completely understand.
yeah.
Completely.
Yeah, but terrible justification. You're a way better person than me. And good for you. And that is not said in jest. I mean that wholeheartedly. Um,
Well,
so okay, so let's take a look at your work right now, and let's
maybe
start.
time to pare down some of the things on my website then.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. It's like
Yeah.
you have got so much work. I mean, you are.
Yeah, I think over the years I've gotten to be so diverse in my work that it was like I just wanted to show my audience everything that I could do without necessarily sharing the best of my work. So gradually every time I go back to my website, I'm like, oh, I could take that painting down. That one's been up there for a while or whatever. But yeah, probably could use a little overhaul pretty soon.
So, are you saying you
But
put everything you paint on your website?
no, I definitely do
Oh,
not.
okay.
In fact, I try to kind of take down a few every time I add a new one,
Oh, okay.
just to sort of even things out.
So
But,
there's a lot more than this then. You've done a lot more than
oh
this is
yeah,
what you're saying.
yeah,
Unbelievable.
hundreds more.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you're very prolific. That's amazing. So let's
Thank
talk
you.
about this one. Is this one of your children?
Yes, that is my son Everett, and that has been the big star of just this past year, actually.
It is
It's called
gorgeous.
King. Thank you. It's called King of the Wild Things, and if you've ever read Where the Wild Things Are to Your Children, it's based on that classic children's book.
Yeah.
And so he's in the woods and he's got these animals kind of lurking behind him there, and put him in that costume, which he was 3 years old at the time when I put him in it, and he barely fit into that thing. He's a big kid.
Mm-hmm.
But I was so glad that I got him in there just in time. And he's just, yeah, he's kind of the epitome of that little child that follows their impulses, and does what they want. And that's what kids do. And they're definitely wild. They're these, rudimentary versions of who they're going to be someday. So just trying to capture that element of whimsicality and just being in the moment of being a child, but also like his expression was very, very important to me to capture. It was kind of this combination of vulnerability and innocence, but also just that audacity of being a 3-year old, a three-nager,
Oh, you
we like to
totally
say.
nailed that. You totally nailed that. If I had to describe it, it would have been the same way. I mean, he
That was what
looks
I was going
innocent
for.
and mischievous at the same time.
Yeah, all of those things.
Yeah. You know what I find interesting about this is, and I haven't read the books, but you've got this menacing wolf and this menacing bear and this menacing deer. I find that kind of funny. Is that significant to the book or is it just another animal
They
you threw in
are.
there?
They are.
Okay.
They're kind of they represent these wild urges that you have to keep under control. I mean, this little boy in his imagination, he goes off to this land where he becomes the king of the wild things, and there are
Yeah.
all these, you know, reckless, rompous kind of creatures that he becomes the king of. But really, he needs to come home and come back to the safety of his family and his hot dinner back home.
Yeah.
And so they represent those animalistic urges in a sense, but they could also be like guardians for him, in a way too. So you could take it any number of directions.
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful. I love the narrative quality to it. And one thing that I noticed about your work that is really interesting to me is how much you paint your children. I mean, I'm assuming many of these are your own
Yes.
children. Is
Yes.
this your
That's my
child as
daughter,
well?
Cecilia.
And do you sell these
Yep.
paintings?
I do. I do. Sometimes it's harder to let go of them. This one is actually headed to a show at Robert Lang Studios this fall. And then the one of my son that you just showed, that one has already sold. So yeah, it can be
Wow.
tough, but
Oh,
at
that
the
would
same
be.
time, for me, it's always about the experience of putting it all together, of working with them individually, working with them directly, taking all the reference photos or painting them from life and then creating a concept and making it come to life on canvas, to me, that's really where the joy is. So I'm okay with departing with the finished piece because I got to be there for its full creation.
Yeah.
So I've come to
That
terms
makes
with
sense.
it for sure.
And I guess
And
when
there's a
you,
few that I'll never let go of.
oh, there are. Well, and I guess when you do it
Oh yeah,
so much, probably makes it a little bit easier to not get attached because you have so many. Oh,
I do.
this
I
one is
do.
also absolutely gorgeous. Wasn't this one of the winners of the Portrait Society
Yeah, that one was a finalist in the
finalist?
Portrait Society, and it's tiny. It's only like 8 inches by 6 inches, really tiny piece. But I got the biggest compliment from Kwang Ho when he saw that painting, and he said everything fits. You know, there's not a brush
Mm-hmm.
stroke wasted, and that really meant the world to me because I do fight that urge to just render and over render when I paint. So when I can do a painting and make all the pieces fit together perfectly, that's just, it feels like a miracle to me.
Not a brushstroke wasted. Leave it to Kwang Ho to sum up good painting with a one phrase like that.
He knows.
Yeah, he's sharp. Yeah, and I would agree with that description. It feels like you almost did it in your sleep. Like it was so easy.
It was one of those that just flowed perfectly. And that one
Really.
I did sell, and I wish I hadn't. If I could take it back,
Oh
I would.
no, it was a finalist and you sold it?
It was sold before it was a finalist.
Oh, it was.
Thankfully, she loaned it back to me. But yeah,
Yeah, that's a shame.
maybe she'll will it back to me.
Oh man, yeah, that's a beautiful one. And then you've done a few pet portraits, it looks like. How do you enjoy doing
I
that?
have. I do, yeah. They're fun and whimsical. That's of my dog who is now, wow, she's ancient now. She's 12 years old, but that was when she was still kind of an adolescent, and she got into my phthalo green, and I think that painting's called The Incident.
Oh
I
man.
still have the rug with all that phthalo green in it,
No,
and she pooped
really?
green for a few days, but she was fine. She was not. It was the non-toxic stuff. So
Oh, that's good. Is phthalo non-toxic?
apparently,
Okay,
she's
good.
still living. She's 12 years old.
She's still,
She's just fine.
and she hasn't acquired any superpowers or anything.
Maybe that's it. Maybe it was. Maybe that's what helped her live so long.
Okay, and then what about this one?
That's a painting of one of my best friends from college. That's her son. She's actually got 5 children, and I've gotten the privilege of painting each one of them, usually when they're around the age of 2. And that's kind of what I tell clients when they want me to paint their children. I'll say, hey, I think one of the absolute best ages, if you had to pick, is between 2 and 3 years old because they still have all that baby fat. You can pose them with their bare feet, with their toys, but they're old enough to be able to work with you at the same
Yeah,
time and just kind of be a little bit more accommodating. So that's my favorite age to paint. And probably the reason I've painted my kids so often is I'm just like, oh, well, I love every stage of a child. But, for people who are investing a lot of money in commissioning a portrait, it's like, okay, you have to just sort of choose. And that's what I tell them
yeah.
usually.
That's good advice. The other thing about that age is they finally have a face that at least resembles their adult face. I mean, it's obviously still a kid
Yes.
face, but all babies sort of look the
Yes.
same, you know?
Yeah.
And then by the time they're
Yeah.
two or
They change
three,
so much.
yeah, they start to look like this guy looks like a little man. Like I could totally picture him
He
with a
does.
suit on, but they don't look like that at 6 months old.
Yeah, I think he's probably about 11 or 12 now already, which is crazy. But he definitely looks the same still.
So one of the things that I admire about you, I experienced personally, I had the honor of experiencing personally, and that is how fast and how well you draw. Because you painted me once at the Porch Society, and
I did.
you freaking nailed it. In 3.5 hours, you did a finished portrait, or I mean, relatively finished. I mean, it's all relative, right?
I
Finished.
think it was 2.5
Was it
hours
only two and
actually,
a half
but
hours?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
of
I
me.
remember we were kind of pressed for time, but yeah, that was so much fun.
It was fun, and I cherish that thing. It's awesome.
Oh,
but you
thank
nailed
you.
the likeness. So I want to look at some of your alla prima sketches. So is it safe to assume, since it's alla prima? Oh, demos from life. Yes. So they are from
Yep, those are
life.
all done from life. Hmm.
So I'm going to assume, because a lot of people draw from life and don't really consider likeness important. But after seeing the way you
Yeah.
drew me and seeing you draw other people, you just have a gift for nailing it, nailing a likeness. Is this something that you've you have sought after, or is it something that's innate to you?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, obviously, it takes a lot of practice to master drawing to a point where you capture the likeness. And Jeff, you're amazing at this yourself, but you know that there's moments in your drawing or painting where you lose it and then you get it
Mm-hmm.
back and then you lose it again and then you get it back. And sometimes it's just a matter of constantly searching and moving things around in micro shifts to
Mm-hmm.
get that likeness. Ultimately, though, it comes down to the structure and having a really, really solid start and a solid light and shadow structure from the beginning.
Right.
So when I'm painting or drawing from life, I'm really looking at the light and shadow shapes first and how they relate to each other. And then the smaller details can kind of help seal that likeness. But I think a likeness is set from the very first brush strokes because you have to have that in your mind's eye already and kind of
Right.
know, okay, this is the way the model's face is turned, whether it's 3/4 or profile or whatever it is, and just getting those incremental distances for the proportions correct. That's so important.
Yeah.
But it's important to me because I care about the people that I paint to a degree where I want them to see themselves in it and hopefully it's a great experience for them as well. So I have this, I can't help it, but I always have like this emotional connection with whoever I'm painting and just that's important to me for some reason. So in a way, I've had to sort of try to train myself out of that as I create more figurative works that are maybe a little bit more narrative or don't necessarily have to have a good likeness, because ultimately I want it to be a great painting and not just a painting of this specific person. So yeah.
Hmm.
I don't know. It's kind of a struggle for me because I want it to look like them, but then it doesn't necessarily have to. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. So innately, you just have that innate desire.
Yes.
So why when you're doing a multi-figure narrative painting or just a narrative painting in general, why not just continue with a likeness? How does changing it improve the painting?
Well, sometimes, and this is going to be, I don't know, it's up for debate, but
Right.
sometimes galleries do not like how the model looks, and that
Oh,
sounds really bad. But if you're doing a painting for a gallery and it's something that they want to be able to sell to anybody, it can't be. I mean, sometimes it can, but
that's
usually
actually
it can't be
happened to
just like
you?
a
A gallery?
specific portrait. It has. Like, I painted a figure one time where she had a very, very bony back, and it was a nude from behind, and she was reclining, and her shoulder blade was kind of like digging back to a point where it was this really sharp triangle shape.
Mm,
And the gallery came back to me and they were like, we love this painting, but can you just soften that shoulder blade a little bit? And they're like, I'm
okay.
sure that's how it looked, but so things like that, maybe I've had to change a little bit just to accommodate them and to make it more sellable, which
Hmm.
feels like just feels a little dirty to me, but that's okay.
Yeah. What a sellout. I'm
Yeah.
just kidding. Well, I mean, I'm doing that right now on a painting I'm working on where I'm editing the anatomy to make it more beautiful, more interesting. Because we all have little weird quirks about our bodies. There's no
Yeah.
perfect body,
Yeah,
right?
for
Um,
sure.
but what about the faces, though? Have you ever had a gallery tell you they don't like that face and have you change a face?
Um, no, because usually what I manage to do is take that model and make it look like them, but make it look like the better looking version of them.
Oh, that's a gift that I don't have. I'm way too honest.
So, so that comes from, yeah, a lot of experience with portrait commissions and having people
Yeah.
come to me and be like, hey, can you maybe change this about me, make my jawline a little bit smoother or whatever it is. So I've had to do that over the years, and usually that works out okay. But mostly, I guess for me personally, I'm just trying to focus less on over rendering a portrait or a face and making it more painterly. And if that means that it's not going to look as much like the model, then I need to be okay with that because I
Mm.
want it to be a great painting.
Hmm.
So I'm trying to get out of that tight realism a little bit and be okay with things being less perfect so that it looks more like a painterly painting. So that's where I'm working on that.
Well, that's
And
a good
yeah, I
segue into
mean,
this painting because that's how
sure.
this one feels to me. Where, I mean, it might look like him, but again, you have a real, well, no stroke is wasted. I would say the same thing about this painting that Kwong said about
Yeah,
your
that
others.
was another very quick demo painting. I think I did that for the Oil Painters of America convention a few years ago. And we
Wow.
had a live model, and he was fantastic. He was very experienced. That always helps because they sit real still. Um, and I purposely set up in a spot where that glare was on his
Oh, I
glasses
know that's gold. That was
because
so
I wanted
smart.
to I wanted to pull it off. And I was trying out this new color from Michael Harding. I was trying out his cobalt teal. And I was like, okay, where can I sneak this in? So I just stuck it everywhere in the painting. So you can see that along the edge of his forehead. You can see it mixed in with the whites and the glare of the glasses. You see it in the
Right here.
hair.
Yeah.
And it just kind of added that coolness to contrast the warmth in his face. So this painting to me was just a joyful experiment in brushwork, in boldness, in yes, getting the likeness, but just going for it. It was one of those days where I was like, I got this. I'm just gonna go.
Yeah, you had it.
I don't
I'm
I
glad
don't
I
always
wasn't
have
painting
days like
next to you that day. Jeez Louise, you nailed it. And this is I love this eye too. I wish we could zoom in. Oh, well, maybe we can. Can we? Nope, can't. Nope. I
oh,
wish we
sorry.
could zoom in, but it looks like there's like 4 brushstrokes in there on that eye. I mean,
Yeah, probably just a few.
it's incredible.
You know,
Real
I
economy
think you
of
can say a
brushwork.
lot with a little. Yeah.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, beautiful
Thank you.
work. Um, and then you have a lot of nudes. Let me see. Let's go back
Mhm.
to, how do we exit out of here?
Well, I'd love to talk about the first one in that gallery if you can pull that one up.
This one here.
Yeah, that one.
Ooh, that is beautiful. Yeah, tell me about
That one
this one.
is really fun. It's in Daniel Sprick's studio
Is that
here in
Daniel right
Denver.
there?
And that's Dan right there.
Yeah,
And then on the
you.
left is his student and kind of somebody he's been mentoring for a while. His name's Tanner. And so Tanner actually gave me the idea for the title, which was the student, the model, and the mentor, or something like that. I don't remember if that's what it was exactly, but it was really, really fun to capture that dynamic, the two of them painting together, and then the model in the center. So I
Yeah,
was
and you
really,
got the
really
hardest
happy with that
lighting
painting.
with all shadow.
Yeah, that's what happens when you walk in late.
Yeah.
But I actually don't mind being the last one to set up in front of the model because sometimes I find that um, you get the most unlikely angle is sometimes the best angle.
Yeah, I think you kind of lucked out on this one because I probably would have
Yeah.
avoided this. And it turned out to be really beautiful lighting with that kind of rim lighting on her leg and on her forehead and hair. It's
Thank
beautiful.
you. Yeah, it was
But
a lot of fun.
but the likeness thing again. I mean, come on. I knew that was Daniel Sprick. It's just like this
That's all
tiny little
gesture.
choppy. It's the gesture. It just he
Just gesture.
yeah. I mean, he definitely has a way about him, and you captured it. Just the way
Thanks.
he moves, the way he stands, and he's this
Yep.
thin, kind of long, sinewy kind of figure, and you
Uh-huh.
totally nailed that.
And he always wears the baseball cap and the apron. So, I mean, it's
Yeah, maybe that's it.
unmistakable.
Yeah, no, it's more than that. Yeah, you nailed it. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
And this one is, I mean, it's a thumbnail, but this is gorgeous as well. Is this also at the
Thank
studio?
you. Yeah, that's another live model that we had. I haven't gotten to paint her in a while. She's moved on. You know, models are they're kind of transient. They come and go, unfortunately. The good ones always move away.
Yeah.
But I love that she was just this real woman in front of us,
Mm-hmm.
and just getting to paint that beautiful skin, those beautiful curves. That was such a privilege to me. And that's how I look at painting a live model. I don't take it lightly. It's a real responsibility to capture someone who has become that vulnerable in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really take that into consideration when I'm painting from life, whether it's a portrait or a nude, but especially the nudes, because it is, it's humanity in front of me. And I just want to capture that to the best of my ability and really do them justice. And usually I feel like I don't, but that's always the end goal. I just want to capture that beauty and
Right.
and show that.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. I mean, you really have a beautiful sense of flesh here too, because I'm assuming she's Indian.
Yep.
Yeah. And that Indians have a certain flesh tone that's unique to them, I
Yeah.
think. And there's kind of these
Yeah.
violets and purples and stuff that you
Yes.
captured in there. It's very subtle and beautiful.
Yeah. And it's tricky too, because you want to capture their local skin tone, but also you're restricted by whatever color the light is that's on them. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was at Kwang Ho's old studio at the Art Students League in Denver. And we always had fluorescent lights. We had multiple light sources. It was confusing. It was
What?
just downright
Why?
confusing. I don't know. That's just what we did. So
That's
every week I
interesting.
would show up and be like, all right, I got to figure this out. Just got to figure this out.
Yeah, let's look at that again. So is that I guess that didn't have very direct light. I lost it now.
Oh, you
Um,
just had it there. Yep. To the right a little bit
to the right.
and up.
Oh, right here.
There
Okay.
you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
So
not
we
very
would
direct.
put
We
a
got
light
two
on
shadows.
her.
So we got two shadows here. So there's
Uh-huh.
at least two light sources.
Yeah. Yep. So we would have the fluorescence overhead, and then she would have maybe a warm spotlight that we'd pose to try to get some more actual shadow shapes. But usually they were pretty diffused, so you can see that in the
Yeah.
edges.
See, that's just because Kwong can make a painting out of anything, and he's just torturing the rest of us. That's his
Yes,
problem.
you can.
Yeah.
But then it's
Yeah.
our problem.
Yeah. So he just wants to show off. Dang it. Um, Incredible. All right. So one thing I wanted to mention, you had talked about capturing a likeness with shadows, and I'm going to encourage all my students to listen to what you said. Let me pull up
Mm-hmm.
another portrait here. Well, let's pull up that guy because I think that said it all right here again. Um, and we spend a lot of time just working on posterizing the light and dark pattern.
So
And
good.
right, yeah. And I often tell them, I tell them something that I'd heard from an artist named Alvin Gittins, who died back in the 70s, who said that if you're walking down the street and you see someone a block away, you can tell who they are, but you can't see their eye color. You certainly can't see their eyelashes. You can't see any
Yes.
details at all. All you see is a light and dark pattern, quite small at that. And so you can
Yeah.
recognize them with that light dark pattern. So I encourage them to just focus on that. But that's kind of so I'm grateful that you said that, like how important that is, because I think it's
Yeah.
easy for
Yeah.
beginners
But
to just
then,
want to go for the details.
right. But then what do you do when you've got a flat light source? So like this painting, he's mostly in the light, right?
Right.
And I actually love working with portraits where there's hardly any shadow. And I
Yeah.
love doing that because the other thing that you can do to help define form is turn it with varying color temperatures. And that is the next level, right? That you master value, which we never actually master value, but you try to master value. And then the next step beyond that is to turn form with color temperature. And so, like his forehead, for example, you've got all these minute plane changes going on in there,
Mm-hmm.
but it's all pretty much under this flat light. And you've got that highlight and then some slightly darker values around it. But you're absolutely right. You can recognize somebody from a mile away just by their light and shadow, but also the shape of their head or the shape of their face. And
Mm-hmm.
so he's got a really recognizably large, broad forehead that might help define his likeness a little bit, or the length of his nose. He's got a fairly short nose, so that's kind of important as well. So I look for those things also. And then really honing in on the light and shadow, what little I have there. I actually used the background in this painting to really chisel in the shapes that I was seeing. And especially in the forehead or the ear, for example,
Mm-hmm.
those were my opportunities for really sharp edges, kind of draw you in. And then everything else could kind of get soft and painterly, or lost, lost edges.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I definitely agree with you. Light and shadow helps define the form and the likeness, but plain changes with color temperature can as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. So let's look at some of your flower work. Um, we've got a lot of this.
Gratuitous flower painting.
Yeah, we've got a lot of these in our yard right now. Beautiful.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So what is it about flower painting that you enjoy? Because I've never done it.
It's sort of,
And I find it beautiful, but I've never ever painted it. I don't think I've ever painted a flower even in another painting.
oh, really?
No, I'm
Wow.
trying to think if I've ever painted a
Um,
flower. So I always wonder what draws people in. Not because I don't appreciate it, because I think it's gorgeous, but I'm curious what draws you into that subject.
it's a number of things. Flower painting really has been teaching me about how to design and arrange shapes in a way that you can't with people, because people are just so much more straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but flowers, there's an infinite possibility for design, right? And it's a love-hate thing, because I will just paint something and then just get super frustrated with where it is going, and maybe hating my design at first. But oh, guess what? You can just turn the vase and maybe get a different perspective there, or paint the same flower from 3 different angles, and you have a full bouquet. So flowers for me create the opportunity for a lot more imagination, and just helping me use my creative resources a little bit more, rather than just painting what I'm seeing. So
Okay.
they forced me to practice design in a lot more meaningful and intentional way. And I love that they give me the opportunity to pull out my paints straight out of the tube and just slash them on there, like bright yellow, bright cadmium, bright red. Um, I don't get to do that as often with portraits and figures.
Right.
So it's also an opportunity to manage that bright chroma, but also still try to master the values. So it's extremely challenging to me personally,
Yeah, it looks
much more than
challenging.
painting people. And
Oh,
in this one, even I'm
seriously?
looking at it, I'm like, oh, I could have done a better job of maybe toning down some of those yellows, and still capturing that brightness without it being quite that loud. But I'm learning from every single one of these. So, yeah.
One of the things I like about this painting, and I guess you kind of addressed this, is how you designed the leaves down here. And I
Hmm.
love the way you kind of chiseled their shapes by drawing the negative
Yeah.
space around them. It's
Yeah, that is a lot of fun to try to figure out. It's a lot of problem solving. And I will scrape off the leaves, start over, add more. I'll let it dry. I'll work back into it. I almost never paint a floral just the way I see it in
oh,
real life, because it's never going to be a perfect design, or exactly how you want it. So I'm usually just working with the materials in front of me and putting them all together in the painting.
so how do you manage? Okay, we talked about value pattern and how value pattern shows form, right? How do you
Hmm.
manage keeping true to the form and while editing? Because every time you move a leaf, it's going to cast a different shadow on a different leaf, and I mean, it would be really
Right,
difficult to
right.
actually predict what that shadow might look like. And so, how do you
That's
manage
really
editing?
true. I keep my light source really, really consistent. So as long as I know where the light is coming from, I can usually have a pretty good idea of how things are going to fall into place, even if there's a variation in shape and form.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and once in a while, I'll take a number of reference photos of my original composition to just refer back to if I have to change it later. I'll be like,
Okay.
oh yeah, that's how that looked. So I can um, just kind of remember that and then move forward knowing that I still have that reference at my disposal. But I almost never work from the references unless I absolutely have to. With flowers, I really prefer to work from life almost entirely just because the colors are so different in a photo. They're just not, I don't know, they just don't do it for me. I can't get the same excitement out of a photo of flowers that I can from working from life. There's also kind of this adrenaline rush. You're like, okay, I got maximum 2 days before these fade. I got to get this in.
Do you even have that
So,
long before they change shape?
uh, depending on the flower, yeah, you might just have a couple of hours.
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking
Um,
to Carlo Russo about this on the podcast, and he was saying that he could go away to lunch and then he'll come back and a tulip closed on him.
well, that's
And
why I
there's,
don't paint tulips.
yeah,
Tulips are terrible.
he paints tulips a lot. They're beautiful. So you've experienced that tulips are a pain in the rear, huh?
Yes, they are.
I didn't
They
know
just
that.
tip over, you know?
Well, okay, so let's look at some of your. Oh, this one's gorgeous. I like this.
Oh, thank you.
That's beautiful. So
Yeah,
obviously
that was
this is
another
more of a fall
experiment.
painting. So you broke your pattern.
Right. I did. I remember painting that one with my son. He was a couple months old at the time. He was sitting on my lap for half that painting.
No
Um,
kidding.
yeah, that's my biggest memory of that painting, actually. Not even the painting itself, but just holding him while I was doing it.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was that was kind of a fun piece because I don't usually do a vertical composition for these kinds of still lives. I prefer a really long, kind of stretched out horizontal format. And so I was challenged to make it interesting from top to bottom, but with the main focal point all being at the bottom third of the painting. So I pulled those leaves in from my backyard and put those in there and tried to make it kind of this musical rhythm, almost like a piece of music, staff paper, and you see the notes kind of stretched out on the on the music. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that's
I
what
think
I was
so, yeah.
envisioning. I think this together.
Well, you definitely pulled that off because I keep coming back to here and then bouncing up and bouncing over and bouncing over and then back to here.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, you've definitely got control of my eyes. Nice work on that one.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, still life to me is a great way to. I like to listen to classical music when I'm painting still life because I find a really strong correlation between design in florals and just the classical form of the music of Beethoven or Mozart or that kind of thing. And I know that Richard Schmid used to do that all the time with his paintings also. And there's really something to be said for that because um, I don't know if you have any background in music, but
Mm-mm.
as a classical musician, I'm just constantly finding connections between those two things. And with artists, we really don't have as strong of a vocabulary to describe what we do as musicians do. They've got the whole Italian language to
Hmm.
describe how to convey this music. And we're just kind of like, make it brighter, make it darker. I don't know, change that value or change that hue, but we're still fairly restricted in how we describe what we do. So I like to think in musical terms to help me understand my painting a little bit better,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
I think, yeah, it does. You know, and one thing that I find so interesting and kind of strange is how different music inspires different types of painting. Because I've had that same experience. If I'm doing a biblical painting, I can't be listening to like jazz or something.
Hmm.
I always got to go to classical, or I can't get into the rhythm of the painting. I can't.
Yeah,
And I don't
yeah,
know
that's
if
really
that's a
true.
nature or nurture thing, or if that's because we've been forced to clump those two things together because we understand that they share a similar history, or because there is actually a artistic relationship innate to those two style or to those two different mediums? I've
It
often
could
wondered
be.
that.
And I know a couple of years ago, Stephanie Thompson, who you just interviewed, and then Michelle Dunaway had a conversation about that on one of their Instagram
Hmm.
live things. And I would love to dig that up again because they talked about that correlation. And it was such an interesting conversation. I was like, okay, I would really love to explore that topic a little bit more. Because I think you're right. It could be nurture, or it could just be that some things are inherently a certain way.
Yeah.
And that's just how we have to go about it. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I do
It's
know
worth exploring.
it is. It's a really interesting topic. I do believe there is something about the tempo that's independent of the music style,
Yes,
that definitely relates to subject matter in painting. A painting that is more
totally agree.
dynamic, you want to create more energy, you want to be listening to something with a more dynamic, higher tempo, more energetic music. At least that's my experience.
Right,
Um,
right.
anyway,
But not necessarily painting everything um, at the speed of sound. I mean, you
no,
kind of want
no,
to, you want it to look like you painted it quickly, but not necessarily do it
right,
that way.
right. That's true. So this is an unusual one for you. It's just sort of
Yes,
like in the studio painting. Tell me about this one. What
pretty
motivated this
much.
work?
When I paint things in my studio, or a lot of the time when I do a self-portrait, um, I'm usually just out of ideas at the time.
Okay.
And so I paint what's in front of me to try to get that creative juice flowing again. So this was one of those where I was like, okay, I have all these things here. Why don't I just paint this?
Hmm.
And I don't know if it's a great design or not. I think at the time that wasn't really my priority, but I had so much fun painting all those different things and then arranging, of course, the little wooden mannequin to give it a certain whimsical feel. And yeah, yeah, it was mostly just for fun. This was one of those that I did entirely for me. And it ended up selling. I think collectors can tell when you're having fun on a painting because it translates.
Yeah.
So that's actually something I tell my students pretty frequently. I'll be like, look, if you were bored painting the background, for example, or painting some part of this painting, your viewer is going to be able to tell whether they're an artist or
Oh,
not.
totally.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard many artists, and I totally agree with this, say that it's, and if the client, if they have a commission and a client just stays out of the way, then they do good work. But if the client gets involved, they do terrible work. And it's because of what you're talking about. The less the artist is
yeah,
interested in what they're doing, the worse the painting is going to be. And I don't think there's a way around that. At least
right.
I haven't been able to figure one out. If I lose interest, I'm useless.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I've totally restarted paintings for clients before just because I hated what I was doing. And I would just tell them outright. I was like, look, this isn't working. I want to try this instead. I promise you it will be 100 times better. And once I tell them that, they're like, okay,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Then I'm
that's
like,
good.
oh, why didn't I just go with that idea in the first place? You got to be brave.
I know,
Tell them that
right?
you're the expert.
Take control. So this one, okay, so tell me, were you listening to Michael Jackson's Beat It?
No.
Because your little mannequin here is doing the moonwalk, and I don't know if that
It
was
totally
intentional.
is.
Yeah.
I don't know either. It was quite a few years ago, so I don't remember what I was
Hmm.
listening to, but I do remember how I felt when I was painting it. And that was just kind of just sheer delight at all the reflected things in the metal jar and then, the paint tubes and all that stuff. So it was really fun.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, let's look at some of your landscapes. Is there any, well, ooh, okay, I was going to ask you, but no, I'm going to take control here. This is beautiful.
Thanks.
So,
That's from Lake Louise in Canada, or not Lake Louise, Moraine Lake. Is
okay,
that the right
is
one?
this plein air?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And was
So
this
that's a 6x9.
one of your trips
That's a
on your
tough
own?
one. This was actually on a baby moon with my husband to Banff, and we were there for our 10-year anniversary, and I was 34 weeks pregnant with my son at the time.
You went on vacation
So
at 34 weeks?
Yeah.
Wow, that's bold.
I did some hiking too. That was pretty
Wow.
intense. But yeah, so I did a little bit of painting. I didn't have a ton of energy at the time, but I remember my husband decided to go hike a little bit around this lake, and the water there is incredible. It's this bright turquoise. It looks fake. It looks like nuclear or something, but that's just the way it looks at these lakes. And so they're very famous. And then the mountains, of course, are really rugged looking, and the snow lasts most of the summer.
Hmm.
So I just set up at this lake, and because I was so close to all the mountains, I had to just kind of hone in on one of the peaks because I'm kind of a sight-size painter when I do landscape. I can't really help it. I just paint relative to what size I'm seeing. Um,
So you don't mean
so,
literally
and
sight size as in a plumb line
not
and the measuring?
literally, no, not literally with the plumb line, but I have to see things the way, or I have to paint things kind of the size I see them.
Yeah.
And I'll do this even when I'm painting from a live model, where if I want to fit the whole figure on an 8 by 10, I have to be really far away.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I just can't see it that way. Can't fit it
I
in.
don't think that's
So that's
unusual.
kind of what I was thinking when I set up this landscape, and it was a real joy to paint that one. I'd love to do a larger version of it. I think that would be really fun. There were canoes kind of going across the lake at the time, and
Hmm.
lots of tourists.
So I'm kind of curious about, this is maybe a ridiculous tangent, but I wonder why the water is turquoise. Do you think it's the reflection of the sky combined with the trees that makes it sort of
That
turquoise?
is something I should have probably looked up. I remember reading about it when we were out there, and I think it had to do with just what was actually in the water and the pH of it and
Algae or
everything,
something?
but
Hmm.
could
Interesting.
be.
Well, it's gorgeous. And you know what I love about it is you've really captured the jagged quality of these rocks. It's like you did
Oh,
a portrait
thanks.
of the rock instead of just this
Yeah,
generic mountain.
right, right. It's definitely a portrait. And I think mountains take some practice painting because they have this quality to them that if you're not careful with your brushwork to be just a little bit, um, just load a little bit more paint on each time, they can look too smooth and too airbrushed almost.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to have enough paint to really get that feeling. And of course, values are so important too, especially when you're painting in direct sunlight like that. So that's always tricky, kind of getting the value of the snow in the shadow versus the snow in the light and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's surprisingly light in the value of the
Right,
shadow snow.
right.
Yeah.
Lots of trial and error.
Yeah. Well, it's very convincing. And then
Thanks.
let's see. And then, oh, this is close to home here in Utah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was on one of my trips. That was last November. That was such a great trip. And I love that hike. Have you ever done that
I have. Yep.
out to Delicate Arch?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of a strenuous hike. It's like 3.5 miles or something. But it's straight up this rock that you climb up to get there. And the payoff, of course, was getting to do the painting at the top. And it was just so beautiful. I'd only seen it in calendars before, or
Mm-hmm.
Utah license plates.
Yeah, it's otherworldly.
It is.
It's bizarre. Utah
So
is bizarre.
hopefully the painting captured my kind of wowed, odd expression over this whole thing. I was just like, I can't believe this is real. This looks fake.
Uh-huh. No, and part of it is just how it is, but the
Hmm.
juxtaposition with this orange of the arch and the
Hmm.
blue of the sky is just so beautiful. And I realize, yeah, the sky is blue and the arch is orange, but still, I mean, you you pulled it off really well. I mean,
Oh,
it seems
thanks.
very convincing, very
The only thing
beautiful.
I think it's missing is a sense of real scale, because if you were to put a person in there under the arch, they would be like this tiny little brushstroke because it's so big.
Yeah,
Um,
that's interesting. And that didn't occur to me probably because I know the place, but maybe you're right. If I didn't know the place, I wonder if I would know the scale of it. I don't know.
right, right.
Huh.
Hard to capture in a 9 by 12, that's for sure.
Yeah. And then well, you do have these bushes down here, but they could also be grass or something.
Right. And I think those were actually the tops of trees
Oh,
down in the
see,
valley
there you
below.
go.
So,
Yeah,
you'd
wow.
never know that unless you'd been there.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't even catch that. That's a good eye. Hmm. And were you there by yourself as well for that one?
I was, yeah.
Jeez. That's crazy. I can't even, I would never do that. Oh my gosh, this one is awesome.
Oh, I love that one. Yeah, that's one of my favorites. That was in Joshua Tree National Park. It was another hike to get to that spot, but it's called 49 Palms Oasis. And it's literally this oasis of palm trees in the middle of the desert in a valley. So you've got the valley walls on either side and then the mountains off in the distance. And oh my gosh, that was such a fun painting to do because
Yeah.
I was the only one there and I could hear all the birds. There were crows cawing in the distance, and um, it just it was so isolated, and yet those palm trees gave it this feeling of security, almost like, oh, I'm safe.
Yeah. And again, by yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah, and those crows are probably
honestly,
vultures, probably circling to wait for you to get dehydrated
yeah,
and
right,
die.
waiting for me to
Yeah.
die. I've painted in a lot of public places before, and I don't mind it. I don't mind when people come up to me and talk to me, but really, I prefer to just be by myself when I'm
Yeah.
doing these kinds of paintings because I just want to give it 100% of my attention. And I find just being surrounded by people or being passed by people on a trail or whatever is really distracting.
Do you,
So
maybe this is too personal and for the podcast even, but if it is, I'll take it out. But do you carry protection of any kind when you're out by yourself?
I have pepper spray.
Okay, well
Yeah.
that's something. Good. I'm glad. Because if
Um,
my wife was out
but
there, I'd want her to have some protection by
well,
herself.
that's why I work out a lot.
Yeah, you got some guns
I
there.
guarantee that if somebody came up to me, I'd be able to outrun them. So
Yeah.
too worried
But you'd
about it.
lose all your painting supplies.
Ah,
Yeah, it's all right.
that's okay.
Better to keep your life.
I mean, when the places I go, like these national parks, really, the biggest risk would be dehydration, maybe rattlesnakes, maybe, um, maybe I sit on a cactus or something. But there's really not that many risks out there.
Okay,
So
good.
you just have to be smart about it.
Yeah.
Bring a ton of water, bring a lot of snacks, plan ahead. Um, I always have my cell phone, although eventually I'd like to get one of those. Um, I forget what they're called, the phone that you can take with you off the grid. Um,
Oh, I'm not aware of that.
Satellite phone.
Oh,
Yeah, a
right.
satellite phone. So eventually I'll probably get one of those. That would be the smart thing to do. But I'm
Yeah.
just not worried about it. I don't live in that state of what if. I'm mostly excited about the opportunity to be immersed in nature and maybe bring a painting back from it.
Maybe it's because you were born and raised in Texas and not New York, where I was born.
I was actually born and raised in
In
Wisconsin, but similar,
Wisconsin.
it's similar because I grew up in the country
Yeah.
and I did live in Texas for quite a few years. And yeah, you kind of get used to um, being out there and being okay with it
Yeah.
and not being surrounded by people all the time.
Yeah. Well, it's a back to the painting. I'm glad you went out there so you can make beautiful work. I just hope you stay safe. Um, but yeah, this is gorgeous. And the again, this economy of brush strokes is what is so amazing. Because I look at the tops of these palms and I'm trying to imagine how I would have handled this. And
Mm.
I don't know that I would have come up with such a elegant solution.
Oh, thanks.
It's just, and the,
That's what I love about plein air. You have to be really economical with your brush strokes because you get a window, unless you're painting under cloud cover, you get a window of maybe an hour and a half before the light changes so drastically. And I did have clouds moving in while I was painting this. So the window of time that I had for that one was even smaller than what it would have been. So yeah, it's very, very quick problem solving
hmm.
the whole way through. So usually I get done and I'm exhausted afterwards because mentally I've just used up everything.
So about how much time do you think you put into a plein air painting like this?
I think that one was about an hour and a half, maybe.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fast. 8 by 10's not terribly small for an hour and a half either. Man, that's great. Well, we are running out of time. I know you've got a lot to do. So let me ask you one final question. If there's a piece of advice that you could give an aspiring artist that you wish you had, what would that be?
Mm. Oh boy, that I wish I
Or maybe
had.
something you did have that you valued. It doesn't have to be something you didn't
Yeah,
have.
I mean, I would say I was so lucky. I had so many amazing opportunities, but um, I would say don't worry about getting into a gallery right away or, selling paintings right away. Just focus on becoming a better painter. And the more you focus on that, the more recognition you'll get. Just gradually, it's going to happen. I think early on, I was so worried about making money at it and selling my work and getting into galleries and getting some kind of recognition that I stressed over it so much. And I was kind of a sellout in a lot of ways. There were paintings that I did that I look at and I'm like, oh, I only painted that so that it would sell. And I
Mm-hmm.
think people can tell, they can tell that you're not really putting your heart and soul into it. So, all that to say, my biggest advice is just follow your passion, paint what you're passionate about, and be uncompromising in that. And you're going to find your following. You're going to find your collectors. They're going to come to you. So that's my advice.
That's great advice. Well, Anna, thanks a lot for doing the podcast. It was a huge honor to talk to you and a huge pleasure. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Jeff. This was great.
Take,
Look forward to listening to all the others.
take care. Thanks for tuning in to the Undraped Artist Podcast. If you enjoyed it, subscribe. And if you could, leave a comment or review. That really helps the channel. Please share the show with your friends, and if you're feeling generous, consider a monthly donation at theundrapedartist.com. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week.